Hello, good morning. How are you doing?
Hey, great to meet you.
Hi, I'm Kivanshi with So There's That. Let's just dive right into this movie. First, I just want to say I think I still have high blood pressure from watching this entire thing. And so before we dive into like the process of that, can you just tell us a little bit about that moment that sparked this idea? I know it's kind of based on how you grew up and how you've moved through the world, but what was that moment that you were like, I'm writing this and I'm also putting it out?
Yeah, absolutely. So the character types in this film, that the three lead guys specifically, uh, are uh, are based on some of the people that I knew growing up. No specific character is one person, but they do have attributes of some of my friends that I remember from my teenage years when I was going through life in Dallas, living sort of a charmed life where I was a kid running around with a video camera making movies and getting hassled by police every now and then, but it was never really a hassle. It was more of sort of like a pat on the back. You're a good kid. I see what you're doing. You're not getting into trouble, but don't shoot off those firecrackers in this neighborhood at night to emulate gunshots because the neighbors will call us. And. So it was something I took for granted for the first part of my life. And as I grew older, I started to realize how fortunate I was to have experienced life like that. And there's undeniably something involving sort of like race and identity and phenotype and all of those sort of things, and being able to code switch things that I didn't even know words for when I was a kid, that I wanted to explore that certain of my friends were not able to do. And I'd been trying to find a way to tell that story as I grew into a filmmaker and as my career progressed. I wanted to find a way to tell that through the lens of a genre film, because that's how I tell stories. I take elevated concepts, put people in danger, and then use genre to try to explore sort of like the base fears that people have. And so it was a few years ago. It was during the pandemic. I was listening to a podcast. They were revisiting older movies. One of them was this movie Judgment Night from the '90s, and the premise of that really struck me as a cool film that could maybe make an homage to by doing a similar idea. And this is Emilio Estevez, Jeremy Piven, Cuba Gooding Jr. film about a group of guys that are on their way home from having a fun night out, take a shortcut through a bad neighborhood, witness a murder, and then the killer is after them. In that case, it was a drug dealer in a bad neighborhood. So I was, as I so often do, thinking about what would this look like if it was present day, if it was a group of black men instead of mostly white men, as it was in that film, and that kind of served as the perfect framework for this lesson that I wanted to sort of like explore. So I didn't revisit the movie. I hadn't seen Judgment Night since I was a kid, so I didn't really remember the specifics of it, and I didn't want to be overly influenced by. Just wanted to take this premise and see where it would take me with the characters that I'd already sort of developed in my head, and so that was the genesis of the film.
Honestly, that's a lot that you have to work with. And I would say, like, while the film is like a thriller and it's very suspenseful, I liked the fact that the truth of what you were trying to depict is in the dialogue and in the conflict within the friend group. Whenever they're not running and whenever they're paused, they're kind of fighting using specific language, as you said, how they are able to move into the world, what their phenotypes represent, not only within themselves, with being the same ethnicity within the Black community, but also to what other people look like them. And so, in terms of translating that from what you and, as you said, your friends experienced in life, how did you go through making that tension translate on the page and on screen?
Well, should I begin? I think that having a very specific idea of who these guys are, how they grew up, what their experiences were like. And for me personally, being able to base it on actual humans that I've known along the way helped me to write to their motivations and their perspectives specifically when crafting the script. But Um, I'll tell you, there's nothing like working with really, really good actors.
Mhm.
Like to be able to find these three guys was a blessing. They made these characters their own. They really connected with them. Uh, Particularly Mason, who was the first guy to come on board. He really connected with the story and with the character, and he'd had some experiences himself. He's mixed race. Um, Nice little full circle moment that he's Cuba's son, and so we have him in the movie that his dad was initially in. That's a reference to that movie. Um, but so that was fantastic. He was kind of like an up and coming character
Yeah.
actor at the time, and after I caught him at exactly the right time because he is the rest of the world discovered him, and I feel very fortunate to have worked with him and with him attached to the project. It was much easier to get the attention of the other guys. So it was kind of like, wish casting to get the team that I assembled because, Algee and Keith are fantastic as well. And Keith plays Tyon, who's sort of like caught in the middle of these two opposing perspectives that become like opposing forces in
Mhm.
this moment of crisis when their instincts take over. And that's when you see like the true character of these guys and what their core beliefs are and how they want to react to what's going on. So you take these characters that you have a deep understanding for and that the actors have a deep understanding of, and you like the spark of this big moment, and then you just sort of like let the characters do what the characters would do.
Yes, and they were actually so great on screen. I loved how you showed like that brotherhood in there because you really have Derek on one end and then you have Kevin on the opposite end. And then Tyon is really like at that pivotal moment of his life, depending on whatever decision, it can either go great or he can go to the other side. And especially with Black men being able to show like that dynamic within the friendship while also moving them forward together, I thought was really well done. And even in a genre movie, it could be easily overlooked. But that's why I really loved how you wrote in their arguments and their disagreements in the way that they were verbally processing what they saw. And then speaking of those dynamics, you had James Vanderbeek, the scene where Derek is in the house. So you have these three guys, and like you said, it's like a wish, like, wow, I got them. So what was the process of getting James, and how was that one set when they had their moment in that space?
Yeah, that moment was magic. I'll go back and I'll answer your second question first. Uh, I wrote the character of Jacob in hopes that I could cast somebody. First of all, I wanted to cast against type. I wanted sort of like a likable, familiar actor that people were accustomed to seeing on screen as a charismatic, trustworthy hero type, so that when you see him in this antagonistic role and you see him commit this act that's horrifying, you understand why the people in the community don't want to believe that he could have done that. They want to believe him because there's this sort of like meta knowledge that this is Dawson. He's this, likable, trustworthy guy. Or at least in before we knew it was James, I wanted it to be that sort of perspective of that sort of a character. And so when I sat down with him and he expressed interest in the script, I was over the moon because like that is like Dawson is the kind of guy that an entire generation remembers as exactly that type of character, right? So when I sat down with him and I realized that he'd really connected with the story as well, and beyond that, he had done some deep sort of like character work. He had already developed like an ethos for this guy that like went beyond what was on the page, which is what great actors do. But he did it in a way that really indicated his familiarity with the cultures and communities that we were dealing with because he's sort of a Texas transplant and had become an adopted native son. He'd been living outside of Austin for years and years. He fell in love with it when he was shooting Varsity Blues 30 years ago. So he really got it, and it helped me to believe that this personal story that I had written was something that could really connect with a wider audience. So I was so happy to work with him. He became like a mentor to the guys. He initially said he was going to go a little bit method and act sort of like aloof and distant, and to try to freak them out so that they would naturally feel uneasy around him. But they effortlessly got along so well with him and approached him with such deference and fascination with his career that he couldn't hold the facade. He ended up just being a mentor to them, and they got along great, and they hung out and had these deep conversations when cameras weren't rolling. But then when the cameras were rolling, as you mentioned, he can be very sinister. That scene in particular, we cross shot that, so all of the reactions were happening in real time, and James asked me if he could improv and go off on sort of a monologue that he had come up with that sort of indicated some of the characters' ideas and motives without telling Mason what was going to happen, so we could get Mason's actual reactions in that scene. And it feels like one of the most visceral, authentic moments in the movie to me. I think it was a great call, and all credit goes to James for that.
And with that moment, there's another moment too, because I feel like this film, again, like I wrote in my notes, like it goes from 0 to 100. And then you have that visceral moment with Mason and James on scene. But then you also have a moment that I think is the funniest part, and it's the rap scene. How did we integrate these sort of speed bumps in the pacing of the fear and like that suspense? In particular, this scene being wholly different than the themes of everything else that's going on.
Yeah, I think that in order to tell a story like this, uh, you need to have moments of levity. I don't want the fear and stress and tension to be so relentless that it's exhausting for an audience. And I think that that scene specifically, um, it stays on theme with some of the expectations that people might have about each other when you're from different communities, and the assumptions that are being made. And the hope is that that scene kind of turns some of those ideas on their heads and makes people think about what you might assume about seeing someone, and how it may seem like these two forces couldn't possibly connect over anything, and yet they do. They connect over being kind of completely wrong about each other, and then hopefully come out on the other side having formed some bond through art or music in this case.
Well, thank you so much for answering my questions. That is our time. I'm so excited for everybody to see this film, and I wish you so much success.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate talking with you.
Thank you.